This is Ion Hong Kong with Key.
And this is Harminder, and we'll be discussing the top news for the week involving Hong Kong and China. And welcome to the 39th episode of Eye on Hong Kong. And joined with me is Key and Drag. No, it is HKU journalism student Vicky.
Hi.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And let's get right to it, shall we? All right. Coming off the heels of this NPC meeting that they have this year, there's an article today that came out today on the Wall Street Journal. That's Article 2. Let's put that on screen. Article 2. And, it says, the coming Chinese crack-up. And I'm sitting there going, what? And it's by David Shambaugh.
I don't think anyone's figured out how to pronounce it.
I'm going to say Shambaugh. Yeah. And in this article, he basically says what I've been saying on the show for months and months, and to other people for 2 years, since Xi Jinping started this so-called corruption crackdown that he's having. Now, the premise of the article basically is that the end game is near for the Communist Party. There are multiple problems in terms of there's multiple problems in terms of the economy. There's multiple problems in terms of the actual power struggles that are happening internally, and there's absolutely really no way that they can get around this, since whatever political reforms that were started by Hu Jintao and the previous president Hu Jintao and the last premier, Wen Jiabao, have been rolled back pretty much. And without that, they're not really going to have any progress, and it's a house of cards coming down. Now, you read this article. What was your thoughts?
I agreed with pretty much everything. I think we've been anticipating kind of when the CCP would.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the downfall of the CCP has been said since the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, but
close in '89. Yeah, but it hasn't happened.
But
yet.
I think kind of what makes this different now is that we now have the internet, and obviously if you look at places like Weibo and all these various message boards, you know that it is very fractured and it's very unstable.
Right.
And so, I mean, before you didn't have that, but now you have this conversation online that there are people who are not satisfied with the way China is being run. And and the article does point out there are people leaving China, there are people, buying houses abroad, there are people sending their children abroad.
Capital flight.
Yeah, and so on and so forth.
You have mainland mothers rushing to the United States to have their babies so they can have a passport there. Why? I mean, if it's the Chinese dream, the socialist utopia that it's always touted as, why are they going to Western democracies of all places? You would think that they would have some sort of kinship with other communist regimes or authoritarian regimes, but they're running to the West. Yeah.
But it points to like another kind of strand of thought. Like, one of Xi Jinping's trademarks is moments is probably, when he said there would be a ban on Western values being taught in schools.
Right.
So isn't the wonderful irony that Marxism is also
a Western value?
Is also a Western value.
German.
So
yeah, he was German, so that's a Western value.
Yeah.
And the funny part is as well is that this. When it comes to Marxism and Leninism, that's another one. That's also is that really Western value? Leninism. That'd be more the East then, right? Since it's Russia. But still, East-West mix then, right? Then you have no Western values whatsoever. But they're sending their kids to Western schools.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. It's like the right hand does know what the left hand is doing. It just doesn't listen to the right hand. You know what I mean? And then you have other signs, economy in a bubble, especially in the property market. And then Premier, what's his, the current Premier?
Li Keqiang.
Li Keqiang, yeah. He said that the new normal, and we're going to have a GDP growth of 7% next year. And 7% for a country as large as mainland China, and with a population of 1.3, 1.4 billion, is nothing. It's quite pathetic. Half of, if not more than half, is just infrastructure building. More ghost cities, more rails to nowhere, and so on and so forth. That's counted in the GDP numbers. The other half is, or the other, what's left is the real economy, which is not much of growth. It's really stagnation. It's just shown as growth.
Yeah, but part of it, I think, isn't it? Part of it's kind of because China used to be this manufacturing-based economy. It wasn't really like compared to the UK. The UK is a very consumer-led economy, so where we just go. Yeah, even now we just go shopping. We just
for cheap Chinese goods.
We just go shopping to try and get ourselves out of recession, basically. And
good plan.
And I think, and whereas China at that time, the UK was in recession, China was growing, and it had the exact opposite kind of economy. It was a manufacturing economy, but people didn't spend money. They were saving a lot because their social welfare their welfare system is not really adequate enough. And now they're
which
trying
makes
to,
no sense considering it's a socialist nation.
Yeah, and now they're trying to turn it around. They're trying to make China this consumer-led economy. And
you see, this is what's going to prove market forces are going to prevail over controlled economies with 5-year plans. People touted saying, ooh, look at the long-term vision. Problem is, when you try to control the economy bites you in the ass. That's usually what happens. The free market will win, always. Free market principles always win. You can always mask the problems with continual money printing, which they keep doing, low interest rates, you name it. But in the end, it has to come down to correct itself of all the ills that have been, the economy's been subjected to by controls and controlling the economy. So the only thing I don't agree with the article, though, is that the author said it's in an end game where it's the final downfall. I don't agree. I think it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? Where it starts now, and it's either will be a slow collapse, but if the real estate market collapses, it'll be quicker.
Yeah.
So that's why they keep trying to pump money into the economy. They keep trying to keep the interest rates low now to try to stimulate the economy. But what do the banks do? They take the money and just put it into real assets themselves.
Yeah, and you've also got the problem of shadow banking.
Shadow banking is massive as well, and that's out of control. So they got a real problem on their hands, and the CCP is trying to put on a brave face, saying, "Look, we're trying to cut down on corruption."
Yeah, it's about thousands of officials.
Yeah, tigers and flies.
Yeah.
But it's some corruption and some purging of people that President Xi cannot trust in case of a collapse. So we'll keep an eye on that. And on the heels of the NPC meeting this month is the talk about Hong Kong and its road towards universal suffrage. The man in charge of Hong Kong affairs in China, Zhang Dezhang, he said that, and he's the chairman of the NPC. He said that he blasted people that were advocating or even talking about independence for Hong Kong, which is a very, very, very small minority. But they keep blowing it out of proportion, and he said that the 8/31, August 31st NPC-SC decision on political reform is ironclad. There's no way to amend it, reform it, you name it. So basically, he's just telling us, you guys are screwed. You take whatever we have, and there's no chance of compromise. That's not politics, is it?
Isn't that what you said about what form of cyanide would you pick?
Exactly. They want us to pick 3 flavors of cyanide. You want chocolate, strawberry, or banana flavored cyanide as your candidates that are going to stand up there. If they're not willing to compromise, and I can see why, because they think this is the problem with communist ideology and thinking. If you back down and compromise, if you amend, somehow the public will view it as a failure or a weakness of the party, which means now we can challenge it further for other things. That's why they don't want to budge whatsoever.
Yeah, but I think the issue of independence, I mean, when Scotland had their independence referendum, I think people here in Hong Kong were watching it with quite a lot of interest, although Hong Kong's not going to get a referendum on whether or not. But
we had our chance and it was blown.
But they did kind of, watch it with interest because it was the case of at least Scotland were given that choice on whether or not they wanted to go it alone, and they decided not to. But the question of independence in Hong Kong, because it's so small, I mean, their Facebook groups probably have likes in double digits.
Most people are just liking them now just to see what they're talking about. Doesn't mean they like the idea. They just want to know what's going on.
Yeah, but the idea of independence, that was really stoked when CY Leung mentioned that book, Undergrad.
This obscure university publication that nobody was really going to read, just a select few, and then all of a sudden it got blown out of proportion.
I met the editor, and he actually gave a talk, and he said that they released the book around September last year. At the time, it was just student essays. Then they asked academics to contribute. It did quite well. It sold about 2,000 copies, which is quite good for an academic for an academic book. That's very good, and they had probably about 600 copies.
And with academia, this is just about throwing out ideas and just discussing it.
Yeah.
That's all it really was. It wasn't saying this is our manifesto that we're going to use to somehow break the one country, two systems policy and advocate independence. That's not what was going on. But unfortunately, the executive government thought otherwise. Well, CY Leung, some of the executive government actually was like, it's his opinion.
I think a lot of the debate has been framed around whether or not this book actually explicitly advocates Hong Kong independence. I mean, the editors say it does. So. The editors actually say it doesn't, but some because it explores Hong Kong nationalism. And part of
can we be more self-sustainable? That's all.
Yeah, and it's quite. The authors had some interesting things to say about the concept of nationalism in terms of the identity and the language, the difference between a mainland identity and a Hong Kong identity. But as for the book, they said it doesn't explicitly endorse independence. They say some people do read into it as an argument for independence, but that's not their intention.
Right.
So,
and now Premier Li Ka-chiang said that the one country, two systems must comply with China's constitution. What about China following its own constitution first before telling us that we have to follow its constitution based on one country, two systems policy? I mean, talk about the pot calling the kettle black, because they're not doing it themselves. Free speech it's in the constitution, doesn't exist. Rule of law, not really. It's more like rule by law. None of it is followed.
Or you could go with CY Leung's definition of everyone must follow the law.
Everyone must follow what I say.
Which is not, which is not with the standard Western concept of
No, and that's where it gets lost in translation from the Chinese or Cantonese interpretation of the word rule of law. Was it faji, right? But it gets somehow translated in English as rule of law. But anyways,
I think that's the most fascinating thing about the language here, because I moved in August. I came to Hong Kong in August, and one of the things I've noticed was Chinese people are very clever with their puns. I've noticed.
Oh yeah, using the language, because it might sound like one thing, but just from the tone, it could be something else. Totally.
But it's also kind of the concept of when I try to translate things for people. And it's quite hard for me to translate certain things, because it has a bit of a deeper meaning than
on surface. I've been told that as well. But bottom line is that the NPC meeting is saying you have to swallow what we gave you at 8:31. You have to pass this, or you may not get another opportunity. The problem is if it's passed, if let's say we pocket it first as we're being told that we should. Do you know what the problem is? You probably do, but the problem is that it would somehow give legitimacy to the chief executive, saying, look, I have the mandate, I have the public vote. Oh, we didn't have a choice. We won't have a genuine choice. We didn't want you, but because you're putting up these 3 puppets or 3 flavors of cyanide, we have to choose one, or a blank vote. One or the other, but they're going to count it as invalid. They won't even entertain that idea. None of the ideas are being entertained. Lowering the threshold, blank votes nullifying the candidates, or under 50% means it's a void or a runoff or something, or recommended candidates, as Anson Chan had with her, a framework from Hong Kong 2020. Nothing is even being looked at. They can't, because they're like, no, it's 8:31 or nothing. You can have these show and tell consultations, but they mean nothing. I mean, I submitted my view, but are they going to listen? No, because the first consultation showed that it did not really reflect the general view of Hong Kongers, even though the majority may say that, oh, we want to pocket it first. They were saying, no, 90% of the city wants it. Like, no. No, it doesn't. They should have said, it's deeply divided. We're going to have to tread. No, none of that. It was just what Beijing wanted to hear is what was written down. And it might be a footnote saying, well, there's a little group saying that they don't like it, but who cares about them? So this is the problem. And do you think anything will come out of the NPC significant when it comes to Hong Kong, the NPC meetings? CY Leung's there trying to curb mainland tourists.
Oh goodness, I'm going to say no. just
Speaking of mainland tourists, we'll play the next clip, and this is what happened in Yuen Long on Sunday. And again, it got rowdy. It seems to subsequently get worse with each protest. I think it's the protesters seeing how they can test their limits as well.
Yeah, but it's interesting that before the protests were taking place in Central, now they're moving to the New Territories area, which is where they're quite close.
Yeah, because those are the towns that are being grossly affected by the influx of parallel traders and mainland tourists who are just coming to shop for everyday goods. It's not like they're coming here and shopping, you know what, there's a jacket I like, I can't get it in China, I'm going to go get it there. It's like I'm getting diapers, I'm getting baby formula, I'm getting Ferrero Rocher chocolates, for goodness sakes. And then the district completely changes and totally throws out the shops that serve the needs of the residents and caters to the tourists. And that's unsustainable.
Yeah, because the people who are leading most of these protests now, they're groups like Civic Passion, Hong Kong Indigenous, and that says something, because the leadership of the umbrella movement, it has been pretty much divided or non-existent. It
was always divided,
non-existent since the protest.
And this is a big problem with the so-called democracy camp, is that they're so fractured. They're so into their own camp that they can't get their act together to fight for a common cause. You got one group saying, let's try to compromise. You got another group saying, no, but we will take something better. And then another one's like, no, you give us civic nomination or bust. You kick out all the tourists or nothing. There's these extremes, and they cannot work together whatsoever, where the other side, the pro-establishment, has a united front, face on everything, and it doesn't look as bad. When one does get out of line, well, just ask James Tien what happens when you get out of line,
But it's also interesting because since the movement has pretty much fractured, and now people like Hong Kong Indigenous and Civic Passion are sort of taking over as...
Well, they're the ones out there,
Yeah, I mean, do you remember the protest that happened in Sa Tien, in the shopping centre? And
it was... That was the week before?
The week before, And I remembered I wasn't there, but I was having conversations with people who was there, and I said, this isn't getting any international coverage from the, any coverage from the international
RT
media.
Covered that.
And then I had to basically eat my hat because
suddenly it was everywhere.
Well, not everywhere, but the BBC did do like a 2-minute clip. It wasn't the top of the hour.
No,
kind
it wasn't.
Of stuff,
it's not meant to be really.
But it was just kind of something there, and I was like, okay, fine. But what is the aim? Is the aim to get more international attention? And I think one person...
But what's the point of international attention?
I mean, one person said, no, the point isn't international attention. The point is, to send a message to the government that we can effectively shut down an entire shopping centre. And, that sends a message to people that, Hong Kong is no longer the shopping paradise for mainlanders. And, and they did shut down the Shatin.
It did kind of spur the executive government into action, because suddenly you heard talks of, we need to curb the influx of tourists, and we need to do something about the day trippers from Shenzhen as well that are causing parallel trading. Suddenly that came about, I guess it does, you shout loud enough, they have to listen. Speaking of international attention, we had the chairman of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee.
Yes.
Richard Ottaway. He came out with his
report.
His report, and we'll put that article up. I believe that's Article 1. And he's saying that Hong Kong is losing its sovereignty. It does not. The proposal on 831 does not really offer genuine choice to voters, and he's saying that the Cameron government should get more vocal about it. And Xi Jinping is visiting China this month.
UK.
Sorry, UK this month. But I doubt anything's going to be made. But he's basically saying everything that the 6 months reports should be saying, but don't. That come out of the Foreign Affairs office regarding Hong Kong. He's saying that it doesn't offer a genuine choice. There are threats to its sovereignty and its press freedom. So we do need to monitor the situation.
Yeah, and also bear in mind that China and Hong Kong, they haven't exactly been cooperative, because CY Leung was invited to give evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he didn't.
He even snubbed Swire, Hugo Swire, the Foreign Affairs, the Foreign Minister.
He's the Foreign Minister,
right?
For Asia.
When he was in town, that's a first, because normally they do meet.
Yeah.
So the relations aren't good, and I don't know if there can be really much change.
It's also bearing in mind, Cameron doesn't have the best relationship with China, because after he was elected in 2010, he met the Dalai Lama. And that is, if you want good relations with China, that's generally not the best
everybody
way to start.
meets the Dalai Lama, but at the end of the day, they're still trading.
Yeah. And then last year, Premier Li Keqiang came to visit, and billions of pounds in trade deals were signed, particularly for the business and science sector, which is what the UK want to invest in. So when President Xi visits the UK, I highly doubt that any mention of Hong Kong will ever come up, because
it won't. It might just be, like President Obama said, let them come to a consensus. Let's not have violence, and that's it. Just give a general, kumbaya moment that everybody should have, but. I agree with you. I doubt that he is going to bring it up. But
there's also another issue. There's a guy called Chaka Umana, who I mentioned earlier. He's like the British Obama if he becomes president. He's a shadow business secretary.
If he becomes PM.
Sorry?
If he becomes PM.
If he becomes Prime Minister, he's a shadow business secretary. And he gave an interview where he said, we should be careful about lecturing China on having democracy, because we didn't have, perfect democracy. I mean, that's kind of the argument people who are against Occupy generally use.
That's the problem, is that you're looking at China in general versus Hong Kong. Our social progression is completely different from each other. We deserve this because we can handle it, as opposed to the other side. If you want to keep your communist one-party rule and you think that's going to keep the most stability, go ahead. But we are ready for more.
Yeah, but it's also interesting when the Occupy sites are still there were people who were really disappointed that the UK government didn't intervene. There are some people who think they should, but it's like
all just talking points. Anyways, we'll be back in the second half, and we will have our guest Phyllis Chung from Hong Kong Unison to discuss ethnic minority issues in Hong Kong.